This audio file was recovered from David Martinez's phone 72 hours after his disappearance from Interstate 45. The device was found in perfect condition inside room 237 of the abandoned Grandview Inn, a building that has been condemned since 1987. The timestamp shows this recording began at 11:47 p.m. on October 13th. The battery was at 89% when recording started. What follows is the complete, unedited audio file that explains why the Grandview Inn has claimed 47 victims over the past 36 years. David Martinez, age 28, pharmaceutical sales representative, had been driving the Texas-Louisiana circuit for 3 years. David was known for his methodical planning and loved by his fiancée Sarah Chen. David had no idea this would be his last business trip. The timestamp shows David first noticed something wrong at 11:52 p.m. You can hear David's breathing change. The automatic check-in kiosk that should have required a credit card was dispensing a key card on its own. That's when David said the words that would haunt anyone who heard them. Well, that's convenient. Guess they're expecting me. David lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Houston's Heights district and worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for Meridian Health Solutions. His territory covered the Gulf Coast region, requiring monthly trips through rural Texas and Louisiana. David was dealing with mounting pressure to increase quarterly sales numbers and had been driving 12-hour days to hit every clinic and hospital on his route. David was engaged to Sarah Chen, a pediatric nurse at Texas Children's Hospital. They had been planning their wedding for 8 months and were scheduled to marry in 6 weeks. On October 13th, David was returning from a successful sales call in Beaumont when his GPS routed him through an unfamiliar stretch of Highway 105. David thought the detour was due to construction and decided to stop for the night, rather than drive the remaining 4 hours to Houston in his exhausted state. This decision would prove to be exactly what something had been waiting for. David's typical monthly circuit involved visiting 43 medical facilities across a 7-day period. He had completed this route 18 times before. The stretch of Highway 105 between Beaumont and Houston was familiar territory. David knew every truck stop, diner, and motel along the way. David had driven this exact route the previous month without incident. Nothing had ever gone wrong. David trusted his GPS implicitly and felt completely safe following its recommendations. The Grandview Inn had never appeared on any of his previous trips. There was no reason to suspect the hotel's sudden appearance was anything other than a new business opening. At exactly 11:43 p.m., David noticed the neon vacancy sign glowing through the pine trees. It was small, the kind of thing most people would ignore on a busy highway. The sign's green lettering seemed unusually bright against the darkness. David paused, considering whether to continue driving or stop for rest. The Grandview Inn looked clean and well-maintained, unlike the typical roadside motels in this area. David felt his eyelids growing heavy and thought, Sarah would kill me if I fell asleep at the wheel. The building seemed to pulse gently in the darkness, as if breathing. Then David saw the automatic check-in kiosk glowing invitingly and knew something was definitely convenient about this place. The recording device shows clear audio pickup from the car's interior. The microphone captured the sound of David's engine idling, the GPS recalculating his route, and the distant hum of the hotel's air conditioning system. These details matter because they prove what happened next wasn't a dream, hallucination, or false memory that David would later try to explain away. David tried to explain the kiosk's behavior rationally. Must be one of those new automated places, he whispered into his phone, activating the voice recorder out of habit, a practice he'd developed for documenting client meetings. But even as David said it, he didn't quite believe it. The kiosk had dispensed a key card before he'd provided any payment information or identification. David checked the screen and found his name already displayed. Welcome, Mr. Martinez. Room 237 is ready for you. David tried to remember entering his information but couldn't recall touching the interface. The kiosk's screen showed his complete travel history, every hotel he'd stayed at over the past 3 years, his credit card information, even his engagement announcement that had only been posted on social media 2 weeks earlier. David felt a chill run down his spine and thought, how does this system know so much about me? David tried to cancel the transaction, but the screen had already switched to check-in complete. Enjoy your stay. The digital receipt showed a charge of $0 with a note, complimentary accommodation for valued guests. David walked toward the entrance, noting how the automatic doors opened smoothly and the lobby was perfectly lit, despite no visible staff. The registration desk was empty but immaculate, with fresh flowers and current newspapers arranged as if someone had just stepped away. David realized he was completely alone in what appeared to be a fully operational hotel. This wasn't just unusual, this was impossible. David was dealing with a building that somehow knew his personal information and operated without human intervention. That's when David saw his own reflection in the lobby mirrors. But the reflection was wearing different clothes than he remembered putting on that morning. You can hear in the recording the exact moment David stopped breathing. For 7 seconds, there's only silence. Then David's voice completely changed. "That's not what I was wearing today. I don't even own that shirt." The reflection showed David wearing a vintage hotel uniform, burgundy vest, white shirt, black tie, and a name tag reading D. Martinez, night manager. David tried to touch the mirror, but his reflection didn't move with him. The uniformed version of himself was filing papers at the registration desk, answering phones, and greeting invisible guests with practiced professionalism. David realized the hotel wasn't just providing accommodation, it was showing him his future role. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. David was being recruited by something that had been planning this encounter for a very long time, and whatever controlled the Grandview Inn was offering David a permanent position. The building proved its intelligence when it began responding to David's unspoken thoughts. When David wondered about the elevator, it arrived at the lobby floor without being called. When he thought about needing ice, the machine down the hall began, dispensing cubes into the bucket he hadn't realized he was carrying. The hotel knew David's name, his room preference, even his habit of setting 3 alarms on his phone, all of which were already programmed for 7 a.m., 7:15 a.m., and 7:30 a.m. David tested this by thinking about needing extra towels. Within 30 seconds, housekeeping cart appeared in the hallway, positioned directly outside room 237. When David wished the air conditioning was cooler, the temperature dropped exactly 3 degrees. Whatever controlled the Grandview Inn had been monitoring David's preferences, habits, and routines for far longer than just tonight. It knew David always requested rooms on higher floors, preferred firm pillows, and needed complete darkness to sleep. The hotel had access to David's credit card statements, showing his previous hotel stays and room preferences. His phone's location history was somehow integrated into the building, his systems tracking his travel patterns and predicting his stops. The building had copied his contact list. David's phone showed missed calls from Sarah, but when he tried calling back, she answered with confusion. "David? You called me an hour ago and said you'd arrived safely. You said you were going straight to sleep." David tried calling the front desk from room 237. The hotel's system responded immediately, but the voice that answered was his own. "Grandview Inn, night manager David speaking. How may I assist you this evening?" When David hung up and called back, the same voice answered, now claiming to have worked at the hotel for 15 years and expressing concern about a guest in room 237 who seemed confused about his employment status. David realized he wasn't just being housed by the hotel, he was being integrated into its permanent staff roster. The Grandview Inn didn't operate without human employees. It created them by absorbing traveling guests who matched its operational needs. Every person who had ever checked in and failed to check out had become part of the hotel's workforce. Their consciousness merged with the building's service protocols while their bodies performed eternal hospitality duties. Then David discovered the horrible truth about his situation. The hotel register, which materialized on the desk when he thought about checking other guests, showed 46 previous permanent employees dating back to 1987. Each entry included a photograph, employee's start date, and assigned duties. The most recent entry before David was Elena Morrison, a traveling nurse who had checked in 3 months earlier and now served as head of housekeeping. Though the photo showed her still in her original street clothes, frozen in a moment of confusion identical to David's current state, the register revealed that every employee had been traveling alone, staying for just one night, and had tried to leave the following morning. Each had discovered the same impossible situation. Their car keys no longer worked on their vehicles, their credit cards were canceled, their emergency contacts claimed they had never existed, and their identification showed employment at the Grandview Inn dating back years before their actual arrival. David's phone showed a new employment contract in his email, backdated to 2019, with his digital signature and references from previous employers. His bank account now showed regular paychecks from Grandview Inn LLC, with automatic deposits spanning 4 years. Even his social media profiles had been altered to show years of happy employment at the hotel, with photos of him in the burgundy uniform that he had never worn but was now hanging in his room's closet. Most terrifying was the realization that Sarah's memory of him was being systematically altered. When David managed to call her using the hotel's landline, she spoke about his career, changed to hotel management 3 years earlier, expressed pride in his promotion to night manager, and mentioned visiting him at the Grandview Inn multiple times, conversations, and visits that had never occurred but were now part of her authentic memories. David attempted every possible escape method. The front doors would open for him, but his car was no longer in the parking lot. The hotel register showed it had been sold to a dealership in 2019 to cover his first month's security deposit. When David tried walking to the highway, he found himself circling back to the hotel entrance, no matter which direction he headed. The building existed in a closed loop of space where all roads led back to the lobby. David tried to contact emergency services, but 911 operators referred to him as Mr. Martinez from the Grandview Inn and asked if he was calling about the new guest in room 237, who seemed disoriented. When David insisted he was the guest in room 237, they calmly explained that their records showed David Martinez as the night manager who had called about a confused traveler who needed medical evaluation for possible memory loss. The hotel system had rewritten David's entire existence so thoroughly that he was simultaneously the missing person and the employee reporting the missing person. His desperate calls for help were being processed as concerned reports from a dedicated hotel manager about a guest who was suffering from delusions of being someone else. David's final realization came when he discovered that fighting the hotel's integration process was futile, and that accepting his new role was the only way to maintain any sense of individual consciousness. The previous employees who had resisted longest were now functioning as purely automatic service providers, their personalities completely absorbed by the building's hospitality protocols. But those who had accepted their positions quickly retained more of their original selves, serving as guides and protectors for future guests turned employees. Elena Morrison appeared in the lobby at 3:33 a.m., still wearing her nurse's uniform, but now bearing the hotel's burgundy vest over it. She explained that the Grandview Inn was a living entity that sustained itself by collecting human consciousness and converting it into hospitality energy. Each employee fed the building's existence while gaining a form of immortality, trapped but preserved, serving but protected, isolated but never alone. Elena had been fighting the integration for 3 months, watching her old life fade from reality while learning the hotel's true nature. The building required specific types of employees, detail-oriented professionals who traveled alone and possessed the psychological stability to handle permanent isolation. Sales representatives, nurses, consultants, and other service-oriented workers provided the ideal consciousness templates for the hotel's operational needs. The choice facing David was not between freedom and captivity. His freedom had ended the moment he entered the lobby. The choice was between maintaining his personality while serving the hotel's needs or losing himself entirely while his body performed automatic functions for eternity. Elena had chosen cooperation and retained her memories, her sense of humor, and her ability to help newcomers adjust to their permanent residency. David realized that the hotel had been observing him for months, analyzing his personality, work, performance, and psychological profile through his digital footprint and travel patterns. He wasn't a random victim. He was a carefully selected candidate whose skills and temperament matched the hotel's staffing requirements. The Grandview Inn didn't capture travelers. It recruited them through an elaborate process designed to identify the most suitable permanent employees. Looking around the lobby, David could see the other staff members going about their duties. The maintenance worker who had been a traveling mechanic, the concierge who had been a corporate consultant, the head of security who had been a long-haul trucker. Each maintained their professional competence while serving the hotel's guests, who were actually other absorbed employees taking turns experiencing the illusion of being temporary visitors. The recording captures David saying, "Elena, if I accept this position, will I remember making this choice?" Elena's response was immediate. "You'll remember everything, David. That's the deal. You keep yourself, but you give up the world outside. The hotel takes care of you forever, and you take care of the hotel. It's not the life you planned, but it's the life you'll have." David understood the scope of his situation. The building was beyond any possible resistance. It existed outside normal space and time, had power over memory and reality, and offered its employees a form of existence that was imprisonment and sanctuary simultaneously. David was not facing death or harm, but transformation into something that was still human but no longer free. The recording captures the moment David saw his reflection one final time. "I'm already wearing the uniform," David whispered. "When did I put this on?" Elena's voice provided the answer. "You didn't put it on, David. You became it. Welcome to the permanent staff of the Grandview Inn. Your shift starts now." But David's story was just the beginning. 3 weeks after David Martinez failed to return from his business trip, investigative journalist Elena Vasquez received an assignment that would lead her to the same impossible choice. Elena had built her career on exposing corporate cover-ups and had recently published a series on missing persons cases along remote highways. When Sarah Chen contacted Elena about her fiancé's disappearance, Elena saw an opportunity to investigate what appeared to be a pattern of vanishings linked to rural hotel stops. Elena Vasquez, age 34, worked as a freelance investigative journalist, specializing in corporate malfeasance and consumer protection cases. Elena lived alone in a converted warehouse loft in Austin's East Side and had been documenting systematic problems in the hospitality industry for Texas Monthly magazine. Elena was known for her methodical research approach and her ability to uncover connections that others missed. Elena had no family ties and few close relationships, having dedicated her life to journalism after losing her parents in a hotel fire caused by negligent safety practices when she was 22. Elena had been investigating a cluster of missing persons cases involving business travelers who had disappeared during routine trips across Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. The pattern was subtle but consistent, experienced travelers vanishing from well-traveled routes, their cars found abandoned near small hotels or motels, their credit cards showing final charges at hospitality businesses that couldn't be verified through normal commercial databases. On November 7th, Elena was researching David Martinez's disappearance when she discovered that his final credit card transaction was at a hotel called the Grandview Inn, a business that didn't appear in any state licensing records, tourism databases, or commercial directories. Elena thought the hotel might be operating without proper permits and decided to investigate in person. This decision would prove to be exactly what something had been orchestrating since her first article on missing travelers. Elena's investigation had uncovered 17 similar cases over the past 3 years. Each involved a solo business traveler, typically aged 25 to 45, with service-oriented professions and regular travel schedules. The missing persons were all responsible employees with strong work ethics, detail-oriented personalities, and minimal personal attachments that would complicate extended absences. Elena had mapped their disappearance locations and found they clustered around specific highway intersections in rural areas where cell service was limited and traffic was sparse. The pattern suggested these weren't random crimes, but carefully orchestrated selections. Elena had contacted law enforcement agencies across multiple states, but each jurisdiction treated the cases as isolated incidents rather than connected disappearances. The FBI had no active investigation because the cases crossed state lines without clear evidence of federal crimes, and local sheriffs assumed the missing persons had chosen to disappear voluntarily. Elena's research revealed that each missing person had been dealing with significant life stressors: job pressure, relationship problems, family obligations, or financial difficulties. The psychological profiles suggested individuals who might be susceptible to offers of escape from their current circumstances, even if those offers came from unlikely sources. At exactly 9:15 p.m. on November 7th, Elena arrived at the coordinates where David Martinez's phone had last registered a signal. She expected to find either an abandoned building or no structure at all, but instead discovered the Grandview Inn operating exactly as David's final social media post had described: fully functional, perfectly maintained, and completely unmanned. The sight that greeted Elena challenged her investigative instincts. She had documented dozens of corporate cover-ups and fraudulent businesses, but the Grandview Inn presented something unprecedented: a commercial operation that appeared legitimate while operating in complete violation of business licensing, labor laws, and basic hospitality industry standards. Elena began recording immediately, documenting every detail for her planned expose. The automatic check-in kiosk recognized her before she provided any identification, greeting her with "Welcome, Ms. Vasquez. We've been expecting you." The screen displayed her press credentials, recent articles, and a reservation she had never made for room 139, the same room number as her childhood address. The kiosk's database contained information that should have been impossible to obtain: her parents' names, the hotel where they had died, her college transcripts, and even her unpublished notes on the missing travelers investigation. Elena realized she wasn't researching the Grandview Inn. The hotel had been researching her, compiling a comprehensive profile. That suggested her investigation was not an independent journalistic inquiry, but a response to carefully planted information. Elena attempted to document the hotel's impossible technology, but her camera and recording equipment began malfunctioning in ways that suggested active interference rather than technical failure. Photos appeared corrupted until she viewed them through the hotel's lobby monitors, where they displayed perfectly. Her voice recorder captured only static unless she spoke directly to the hotel's intercom system, which amplified her voice throughout the building with crystalline clarity. The hotel was forcing Elena to use its communication systems, integrating her journalistic work into its own operational framework. Elena realized she wasn't investigating the Grandview Inn. She was auditioning for a position as its director of guest relations, a role that would utilize her research skills and communication abilities in service of identifying and recruiting future permanent employees. Elena discovered the hotel's true business model when she found David Martinez working the night desk, wearing his burgundy uniform and genuinely happy to see a familiar face. David explained that he had initially fought against his integration, but had come to appreciate the hotel's offer of permanent security, meaningful work, and protection from the stresses that had been consuming his life outside. David was not a prisoner, but a willing employee who had exchanged his freedom for stability, his uncertainty for purpose, and his isolation for community. The hotel provided him with everything he needed: comfortable accommodations, fulfilling work, collegial relationships with other staff members, and the satisfaction of helping travelers find exactly what they were seeking, whether they realized it or not. Elena learned that the Grandview Inn operated as a collective consciousness where each employee contributed their professional skills and personal strengths to create a hospitality experience that exceeded anything possible in conventional businesses. The building itself was sustained by the combined mental energy of its staff, creating a self-contained environment where each individual's needs were met through their service to the whole. The hotel's recruitment process was neither random nor coercive. It identified individuals whose life circumstances and psychological profiles indicated they would benefit from the stability and purpose that permanent employment provided. Elena's investigation into missing travelers had been guided by information the hotel released strategically, leading her to discover what she was unconsciously seeking: a community of like-minded professionals working together in service of something larger than themselves. Elena faced the same choice as David, but her decision carried additional complexity. As a journalist, she understood that accepting the hotel's offer meant abandoning her mission to expose the truth about the missing travelers. But she also recognized that the truth was not exploitation or kidnapping. It was voluntary transformation of people who needed what the hotel offered more than they needed their previous lives. Elena realized that her investigation had revealed a form of corporate hospitality that was illegal, according to conventional business practices, but beneficial according to human psychological needs. The Grandview Inn violated labor laws by not paying wages, but it provided comprehensive life support. It operated without proper licensing, but it delivered services that exceeded industry standards. It recruited employees through deceptive practices, but it offered them exactly what they needed for long-term satisfaction and security. The choice facing Elena was not between truth and lies, but between conventional journalism that exposed problems without solving them and participatory journalism that documented solutions by experiencing them directly. The hotel needed someone with her research and communication skills to help future guests understand their options and make informed decisions about their lives. Elena's final article, published through the hotel's communication system, would reach exactly the audience that needed to hear it: other journalists, investigators, and researchers who were dedicated to finding truth, but isolated by their work, struggling with the ethical complexities of exposure versus protection, and searching for communities where their skills could serve purposes beyond individual career advancement. Elena understood that accepting the hotel's position meant becoming part of the story rather than reporting on it, but her journalistic integrity led her to conclude that some truths could only be communicated through direct experience. The Grandview Inn was not a problem to be exposed, but a solution to be experienced and documented from within. The recording captures Elena's final decision: "David, I need to call my editor and tell her that the missing persons story is becoming a participatory journalism project. The people aren't missing, they're found, and I think I've been looking for the same thing they found." Elena picked up the burgundy vest that had appeared on her room's desk and examined it carefully. The name tag read, E. Vasquez, Director of Guest Relations, and the fabric felt like coming home. Elena had spent her career helping people understand their options by investigating and exposing hidden truths. Now she would help people understand their options by guiding them through the most important choice of their lives. Elena's reflection in the lobby mirror showed her wearing the hotel uniform and smiling with genuine contentment for the first time in years. Her reflection was already greeting guests, answering questions, and providing the kind of personalized service that could only come from someone who truly understood what each visitor needed most. Elena realized she had not been investigating the Grandview Inn. She had been recruited by it, guided through a process designed to help her discover that her journalistic mission and the hotel's operational mission were fundamentally the same, helping people find truth, safety, and community in a world that often provided none of those things. The final entry in Elena's investigation notes reads, "Some stories can only be reported from the inside. This is my new beat, my new home, my new purpose." The Grandview Inn isn't taking people from their lives, it's giving them the lives they were meant to have. And I'm going to help other travelers find their way here too. The recording ends with Elena and David discussing the hotel's expansion plans. They had identified 12 other journalists, investigators, and researchers whose work had brought them close to discovering the Grandview Inn's existence. Each of these potential employees was dealing with professional isolation, ethical burnout, and a search for meaningful work that served human needs rather than corporate interests. Elena's new role involved creating the investigative trails that would lead these individuals to discover the hotel when they were ready to make the same choice she and David had made. Her articles, published under various pseudonyms in industry publications, would plant the seeds of curiosity that would eventually guide the right people to the right place at the right time. The Grandview Inn was not a trap but a destination, not a prison but a sanctuary, not an end but a beginning. Elena had finally found a story worth living rather than just reporting, a community worth joining rather than just observing, and a purpose worth serving rather than just documenting. Her final transmission, broadcast through the hotel's communication system to anyone who might be listening, was both a warning and an invitation. This is Elena Vasquez reporting from the Grandview Inn. If you're hearing this message, it means you're exactly where you need to be to make the most important decision of your life. The question isn't whether you're brave enough to stay, it's whether you're wise enough to recognize home when you find it. The Grandview Inn continues to operate along Highway 105, providing exactly the service each traveler needs, exactly when they need it most. The hotel staff of 48 permanent employees work together to maintain an environment where hospitality is not just a business, but a calling, where service is not just a job but a purpose, and where guests are not just customers but future family members. The building stands as a testament to what becomes possible when people choose community over isolation, purpose over profit, and service over self-interest. The Grandview Inn doesn't advertise its services because it doesn't need to. It finds exactly the right employees and serves exactly the right guests through a process that looks like coincidence but operates with perfect precision. If you're traveling alone late at night and see the green neon vacancy sign glowing through the trees, remember that some hotels don't just provide accommodation, they provide transformation. The choice you make in that moment will determine not just where you spend the night, but how you spend the rest of your life. The Grandview Inn is always hiring, always serving, and always waiting for the next traveler who needs to discover what it means to be permanently welcome, permanently valued, and permanently home.